I was standing in the hallway outside my own study when I heard my wife laugh in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not the warm laugh I fell in love with. Something lighter, conspiratorial. And then I heard a man's voice say, "He won't even know what hit him." 41 years. That's how long we'd been married. I stood there with my hand still on the doorknob, not breathing. I should tell you how I got there. 3 weeks before, my cardiologist had cleared me to return to limited work after a mild heart attack in November. Nothing catastrophic, he said. A warning shot. I was 63 years old. I'd built a commercial real estate business from nothing over 35 years, and my body had decided to send me a memo. I listened. I slowed down. I started coming home earlier, taking walks in the afternoon, letting my son-in-law handle more of the day-to-day operations at the office. My wife had been attentive. That's the word I kept using to myself. She brought me decaf in the mornings. She booked the follow-up appointments. She was the one who suggested I formally step back from the business for 6 months just to rest. I thought it was love. I thought she was scared of losing me. I was the one who should have been scared. Her name isn't important right now. I'll call her my wife, because that's what she was. That's what I thought she still was. We met in 1983 at a friend's backyard cookout in Raleigh. She was 22 and laughing at something across the yard, and I walked over without a plan, which was not something I ever did without a plan. We were married 14 months later. We raised 2 kids in the same house in Cary, North Carolina. Our daughter, who now lives in Asheville with her husband, and our 2 granddaughters, and our son, who went into the army and came back quieter than he left, which was something I never stopped thinking about. The business started in 1989, a single rental property in Durham, then 3, then a small strip mall, then a portfolio that eventually grew into something I couldn't have imagined when I was driving a second-hand Ranger and eating peanut butter sandwiches at a folding table. My wife was beside me for all of it. She signed papers with me, sat across from bankers with me, celebrated with me when deals closed, and stayed quiet with me when they didn't. We were partners. I believed that completely. The man whose voice I heard through that door was someone I'd trusted for 11 years. I'll call him my business partner. We'd grown the company together through the 2008 crash, through COVID, through every rough patch that comes with commercial real estate in the South. He was smart and aggressive in the way good dealmakers have to be, and I'd given him 15% equity in the company 4 years ago as part of a retention arrangement my attorney had structured. I didn't know he'd been meeting with my wife. I didn't know that for most of that winter, while I was recovering from my heart attack, while I was drinking decaf and taking slow walks and being grateful for my life, the 2 of them had been putting something together. I found out by accident, which is, I've come to understand how most people find out about the things that would have destroyed them. It was a Thursday afternoon in late February. I'd come home early from a cardiology follow-up downtown, maybe 45 minutes ahead of schedule. The house was quiet when I came through the kitchen door. My wife's car was in the garage. I assumed she was upstairs or on the back porch. I walked toward my study to leave my jacket. It was the room we'd converted from a formal dining room years ago, with my desk and my bookshelves and a window that looked out over the backyard. The door was slightly ajar. I could hear voices. I stopped because the tone was wrong. Not an argument, not distress. Quiet and close and deliberate, the way people talk when they're planning something they don't want overheard. I stood in the hallway and I listened. My wife said, "The doctors have already documented the episodes. That's what matters." My business partner said, "How many entries?" 3 formal notes in the chart. The GP flagged it first, then the cardiologist mentioned word-finding difficulties in his post-procedure report. I talked to the neurologist's office about a referral. You talk to his neurologist? I'm his wife. I can talk to whoever I need to talk to. There was a pause. "He won't even know what hit him," my business partner said, and my wife laughed. That laugh. I will hear it for the rest of my life. I don't know how long I stood there. My hand was still on the wall beside the door frame. At some point I realized I was holding my breath, and I let it out slowly, the way you do when you're trying not to make a sound. I understood what I was hearing. Not the details, not yet. Those came later. But the shape of it. The shape was unmistakable. They were building a case that I was cognitively impaired. In North Carolina, if a business owner is determined to lack mental capacity, a court can appoint a guardian or trustee to manage their affairs. My wife had power of attorney. She'd had it for years, drafted after a different health scare back in 2015, when I had a kidney stone that turned into a brief hospitalization and scared both of us. It had felt like planning then, like love, like responsibility. The company was worth somewhere around $18 million, depending on the market and which properties you counted. We'd talked in the abstract way you talk about things when you're healthy and think you'll live forever, about what would happen to it eventually. I had always assumed we'd figure it out together. I had always assumed there'd be time. I had always assumed she was on my side. I walked back through the kitchen. I sat down at the table. I didn't cry, which surprised me. I thought I should cry, but instead I just sat there with my hands flat on the table and stared at the grain of the wood and thought very carefully about what I needed to do. I did not go back and open that door. This was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every instinct I had was telling me to walk in there and say what I'd heard. But I had learned something in 41 years of business. The person who reacts first almost always loses. Information is only leverage when the other side doesn't know you have it. I needed to think. I made a doctor's appointment the next morning, not with my GP, not with any physician whose records my wife had been quietly shaping, but with a neurologist I found myself, a practice in Chapel Hill I'd never visited. Under my own insurance and my own referral, I told them I was interested in a baseline cognitive assessment. Proactive, I said. My cardiologist had suggested it given my age and recent cardiac event. The appointment was 2 weeks out. I took it. That same week I called my personal attorney. Not the firm that handled the business, which my wife also had relationships with, but a man I'd known since law school days, someone who had moved into elder law and estate planning. I told him I needed to understand in very specific terms what the legal pathways were for someone seeking to challenge the capacity of a business owner in North Carolina. I told him I was asking on behalf of a friend. He talked for 40 minutes. I took notes on a legal pad I kept in my car. What I learned was this. A guardianship petition in this state requires medical documentation, at least 2 physician statements, and a hearing. But a power of attorney, which my wife already held, could be used to act on my behalf in certain financial matters without a full guardianship proceeding. If it could be argued that I had consented during a period of capacity to certain provisions. Provisions that, depending on how they were drafted, might include authority over business interests. I asked him to pull the original document. He called me back the next day. His voice was careful. "There were amendments filed," he said. "2 years ago. Your signature is on them." I thought about the weeks after my 2022 shoulder surgery, the pain medication, the paperwork my wife had brought to the hospital, tax documents, she'd said, annual stuff that needed signatures. I'd been half asleep. I'd signed. I asked my attorney what the amendments said. He read them to me slowly. The language was precise and damning, and had been drafted by someone who understood exactly what they were doing. I want to stop here and say something, because I've told this story to a few people now, and the reaction I get, especially from men my age, is usually some version of, "How did you not see it? How did you miss it for that long?" And I understand the question. I've asked it myself, at 2 in the morning more times than I can count. The answer is not simple, but part of it is this. When you love someone for 41 years, you stop reading them as a stranger would. You stop being a fair witness to what's in front of you. You interpret everything through the lens of what you've always known them to be. My wife had always been devoted. She'd always been practical. When she started managing my medical appointments after the heart attack, I didn't think she was building a paper trail. I thought she was taking care of me. That's what they counted on, that I would trust her exactly as much as I always had. The neurological assessment came back clean. The physician, a woman who ran a memory clinic at UNC, was thorough and unhurried. She spent nearly 3 hours with me across 2 sessions. Her written report, which I received 10 days later, stated that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment, no word-finding deficits beyond normal aging variation, and no evidence of any progressive neurological condition. She noted that I was, in her clinical opinion, fully oriented, highly articulate, and demonstrated strong executive function. I had that report notarized the day I received it. I also went back to the cardiologist who had written the original post-procedure notes that my wife had mentioned to my business partner. I asked him, directly, whether he had documented anything suggesting cognitive decline. He looked at his notes. He said he had mentioned some fatigue-related word-finding in the context of post-anesthesia recovery, something common and temporary. He said he would be glad to clarify that in writing. I asked him to, please. That letter was notarized as well. Then I went to my business attorney, not the one who shared ties with my wife, but a firm in Durham I'd worked with once on an acquisition, and I told her everything. I played her the recording I'd made on my phone. 2 days after I first overheard the conversation, when I'd come home early again and positioned myself in the kitchen hallway and listened a second time, phone in hand. I'm not proud of every choice I made in those weeks. But I am not ashamed of that one. My attorney filed a preemptive legal action in early April. I won't walk through every step of what followed, because the legal details are honestly not the most important part of the story. What I will tell you is that we moved to have the amended power of attorney voided on the grounds of fraud and undue influence, citing the circumstances of my signature during a period of post-surgical impairment. We had the neurologist's report, the cardiologist's clarification, and the recorded conversations. We also had something my attorney found during discovery that I hadn't known about. A consulting agreement between my business partner and a private equity firm, signed 5 months before my heart attack, that contemplated the acquisition of my company's primary asset portfolio at a valuation significantly below market. They had been planning this longer than I'd known. The case was settled privately. My business partner relinquished his 15% equity in exchange for my agreement not to pursue criminal fraud charges. The amended power of attorney was invalidated. My wife received what she was entitled to under our prenuptial agreement, which, I'll admit, she had apparently not read closely enough, because it contained provisions her attorney later told me she hadn't understood. We were divorced by the following January. I've thought a lot about what to say here at the end of this, because people always want a lesson. They want to know what to take away, what to do differently, how to protect themselves. Here is what I know. My wife was not a monster. That's the complicated part. I think she was genuinely frightened when I had the heart attack. I think she looked at the business and the assets and the future and felt what a lot of spouses feel when they realize they don't actually control as much as they thought they did. And somewhere in that fear she made a choice, and then another choice, and then she was too far in to turn back. Fear is not an excuse, but understanding it is the only thing that has let me sleep. My business partner was something simpler. He was a man who saw a number on a spreadsheet and decided to reach for it. I gave him more trust than he deserved. That's on me. And I am still here. My company is still mine. My daughter calls me every Sunday, and my granddaughters mispronounce my name in a way that makes me laugh every time. My son and I have been rebuilding something slow and careful, the way you do when you've both been through things that changed you. I sold 2 properties last fall and used part of the proceeds to take a week in the Outer Banks by myself, just to sit and listen to the ocean and understand what I actually felt. I felt okay, which surprised me. I had a second assessment at the memory clinic 6 months after the legal proceedings concluded, still clean. The physician said I was, if anything, sharper under pressure than the average patient she saw at my age. I think she was being generous, but I'll take it. The afternoon I came home to find my wife gone, after I'd served the divorce papers, after she'd taken what she was entitled to take. I walked into my study and sat at my desk and looked out the window at the backyard for a long time. The yard needed work. The azaleas had gotten overgrown. There was a section of fence along the back that had been sagging since the previous fall, and I'd kept meaning to fix it. I called a landscaping company the next morning. I fixed the fence myself on a Saturday, with my son helping. He drove down from Raleigh, and we worked most of the afternoon without saying much, and then we sat on the back porch and he asked me how I was really doing. I told him the truth. I said I was angry, and I was sad, and I was grateful, and I didn't know in what order. He nodded like that made sense, and then he went inside and came back with 2 beers, and we sat there until it got dark. That was enough. That was more than enough. The most dangerous assumption you can make is that the people who've always been on your side will always stay there. Documentation is not distrust. Protecting yourself is not paranoia. And the fact that something was once true does not mean it is still true. Pay attention, even to the people you love most, especially to them.